Hello, 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 hello. How good to see you all. Fantastic. Do share how you're doing today and perhaps how your day's going and where you're tuning in from. Let me know how you are. Really lovely to be here with you all. We'll just give it a couple of minutes just whilst people hop across. I'm guessing most are going to be coming across from lunch breaks and all sorts of other things right now. And I am really, really thrilled to be here with all of you today. I'm looking forward to imparting and sharing some of my knowledge about this subject that I am so passionate about and cannot wait to share more details with you on. So we'll just give it a minute or two. How are you all? Do say hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from. How's your day been? Just going to say hello to you all. How is everybody? How are you? How are you doing? Hi, Marlene. I bet it's a lot sunnier in Dubai than it is in South London. I have to say, I am really ready for a switch up in this weather. Anyone else still got the heating on in London? I mean, I have my heating on. That just seems absolutely mad. Um, Hello in the States. Yep, heating's still on, right, Joanna? What is going on? What is going on? Hi, Emma. Oh, I wonder whether you're close. You might be just around the corner. How you doing? Yes. When is it going to change? When is it going to change? Do let me know. Hi, Fiona. Good to see you here. Yes, do it. Does anyone know when the weather is going to change? I don't want to be one of those Brits that's obsessed with the weather, but right now I do feel a bit obsessed with the weather. Like today, come on, has got to be the day. Hi, Brenda. How's the weather in Florida? We're being very, very British here and talking about the weather. Hi, Sophie. 2 days of warmth headed our way. What a treat. Okay, well, all right. Well, that's something to look forward to. Thanks, Chris. That does sound something to look forward to. A little bit cool. Okay, a little bit cool. All right. Well, I think we are almost ready to get going. Going to get one more minute. We will start 1:03 on the dot. Okay. Well, Chris says, Florence, there's a couple of days of warm weather coming our way. And this is a masterclass today on what gold standard interviewing practice really looks like. Now, I'm sharing this information with you not because I'm a stickler for the rules, and certainly not because I want to take away your individuality and your creativity. I'm sharing this information with you today. Obviously, I've spent the last 27 years working as a headhunter. And in the last 10 years, since I started CNC Search or founded CNC Search and latterly CNC Academy, our training and development arm of the business, I have studied interviewing and to quite an intense level. And the information I have gathered makes the case for what I'm about to share with you. I think it's unequivocal. Everything I share with you today is research backed, empirical evidence backed, so that you know that you've got that veracity behind the information that I'm going to share. Anecdotally, I have tons of evidence that from both the candidate experience side and the client experience side, and then what happens once you hire, that again, adopting this style of interview will have incredible advantages for your company culture, for your productivity, performance, and so much more. I'm lucky that I've been invited to share some of what I know about this on a global scale, and I train and develop a lot around how to hire better and how to unlock potential. I had the absolute privilege of delivering the keynote at the Amazon conference yesterday. It was one of the most incredible experiences. So I'm excited to be with you here today. So who am I? I'm betting that I know lots of you online, and I know from some of the names that said hello already that I know you well. But for anyone that doesn't know me, I'm the founder of an all-female team. There's 24 of us based in Holborn, in the heart of London. Our passion is hiring and training and development, so impact and transformation. That's what underpins our organization. I'm also absolutely committed to doing the right thing. So we are B Corp certified. I'm also UN Women's Ambassador and a W Corp Ambassador. I'm really fortunate to use my platform to speak on a global scale. And I too do genuinely believe, whether it's from a candidate that I'm interviewing to a hiring process I'm delivering for a client, or a huge piece of training and everything in between, that my purpose in life is to unlock potential. And it's something I feel deeply passionate about. And today, of course, what we're talking about is unlocking the potential in your organization through how you hire and how you can hire better, more easily, and much more effectively. I always think, and it's probably because I work with a huge amount of private equity and asset management firms, that it's really great to kick off with the evidence so that we can understand why we would look to adopt different practices. And you are so welcome to share in the chat anecdotal evidence, your thoughts, your feelings, and I will absolutely answer any questions at the end. There's a ton to get through. Often I deliver this as a 2-hour masterclass, so you're going to get a whistle-stop tour of all of the highlights from the training and hopefully things that you can immediately adopt within your organization. You've probably heard of behavioural interviews. Now, we know from surveying our clients that around 72% of all of our clients still have unstructured interviews as their dominant interview practice. I wonder what it looks like in your organisation. I am absolutely passionate about organisations adopting structured, behavioural and performance-based interviews. Now, we absolutely know that past behaviour is the best predictor of future behaviour. But I love to introduce a performance aspect because ultimately I want you to hire for the person that's going to be in that role in a year's time. The bottom line is that we know that structured interviews are at least twice, and some researchers say more than that, twice as effective as unstructured interviews. It supports diversity and inclusion. It is far more consistent. It takes out a ton of thinking time. It's legally defensible. And we know from the research, and certainly from incredible individuals like Frank Hunter and Schmidt, who looked at 80 years worth of interviewing data, that it is a transformational tool culturally, as well as for your brand storytelling and everything else in between. Most of our clients will say to us that they are people first. Our people are the most important thing. Does that resonate with you, that you hear that? Our people are everything to us. Yet when you look at the interviews themselves and how they're conducted, what we see so often is a lack of attention to the job description, no formalized hiring process, no attention to what the dream candidate experience looks like, no attention paid to what the dream internal hiring process looks like, that no one's had any training or development on how to interview. And in fact, the statistics are pretty shocking. We know that only 8% of those conducting interviews, and let's face it, if you say that people are your most important aspect of your role, your interview process is the window to what that really looks like. 8% only. We know that most clients, and I bet you too, have experienced really serious repercussions from a poor hire. You compromise on candidate quality, you end up with groupthink, and we know that there's a huge amount of lost productivity as a result of poor hiring practices. And we know that our clients are now saying to us, you know, we need to get this right. We need to change this. And if you want to be at the forefront of how to hire right, now is the time to adopt a new methodology to systematize your process, to create strategic intent in your process in order to get the best result. We hear a lot from candidates about their poor hiring experiences. And I don't want you to be part of that anecdotal evidence that's being shared as part of your brand storytelling. I want it to be exactly the opposite. You want that PR piece to be working for you from every single angle you possibly can. So it's time, I think, for us to adopt something different. But what tends to happen? Well, our brains are hardwired to completely derail the interview process. We know that ego tends to lead a huge amount of hiring decisions, or as people like to call it, gut instinct. And essentially, what we know that to mean is that, are you just like me? Do I relate to you? And as a result, I feel super comfortable with you. And I am so much statistically more likely to hire you as a result in an unstructured interview process. And you perhaps ingratiated yourself to me when I've asked you, tell me about yourself. And as a result of telling me about yourself, I learned that you loved to ski and played golf and you went to the same uni. And I'm like, tick, tick, tick. And then all my confirmation bias goes off for the remainder of that conversation. And I hire you, and then I cannot figure out why 3 months or 6 months down the line, things simply aren't working out as I thought they might. All of these questions are the most common questions asked in unstructured interviews. And yet all the research tells us that they completely limit your opportunity to have any predictive validity of the individual that you then hire. But they feel comfortable, they feel easy. And when you've had no interview training and you don't understand specifically how to structure an interview and how to ask the right questions and how to bake in value to every stage, this is what we default to. I bet for you, you know that people have walked into interviews in your organization, not having done any prior preparation, not knowing the questions they're going to ask, going in to have a chat, not knowing who's involved in the interview process, randomly bringing people in during the hiring process, no formalized feedback procedure. And you're not on your own. But for me, all of these aspects are a brilliant indicator that there's an opportunity to gain competitive advantage, improve culture, retention, performance, and much, much more. I've started to outline the benefits for you, and I bet that you're starting to see that perhaps there's an opportunity for you to start looking at how you can enhance your competitive advantage as an organization. The war for talent is not going anywhere. Legal defensibility for me is an anchor. And in an age where we see much more litigiously oriented behavior, I want your organization to be completely protected. We absolutely know that if somebody told you in an interview that they just got engaged and you wrote that down, and then perhaps they didn't get the role, that potentially that could be considered to be discrimination. I don't want you to be part of any kind of discriminatory cases because of unstructured interviewing. You are 88%, according to McKinsey, more likely to be sued as part of your hiring process if you have unstructured interviewing, part and parcel. I also want you to have that strength of knowledge when somebody starts on day one, that you know how they're going to be measured, not just day one, but day 30, 90, and a year's time. That you've got a tool that you can use to measure performance. I'm going to explain a little bit more about how you can bake that into your hiring process in just a minute. The benefits by far outweigh the disadvantages of putting in a little bit of work to enhance your hiring process, and the time saving that will come as a result of that time investment will be extraordinary. I promise you that. So from all of the research that I've looked at and all the theorists around how to hire and interviewing, there are definitely two big bodies of work for me that really stand out. And I mentioned already, Schmidt and Hunter and McKinsey have done a huge amount of work around this. I've amalgamated their findings, and I want to let you know what works best. So what they both ascertained is that if were all in a position to, and let's face it, as SME businesses like mine and probably like a lot of you on this call, we're not in a position to run assessment centres. And assessment centres have a mix of structured interviews, of work sampling tools, and often potentially even psychometrics. If you can't run an assessment centre, as most of us cannot, then skillful structured interviews give you 60% likelihood of success in your hiring. Pretty strong predictive validity, I would say. Now, add into that a work sample assessment. So looking at a tool that you can use to ascertain how likely somebody is to be able to deliver the day-to-day work. Really important. We love to use them here. And that means taking a look at what they are likely to do, the individual you're hiring for, on a day-to-day basis, and to formulate an assessment of that skill. Combine that with a structured interview, and you are absolutely winning. And what you ultimately are doing when you start to look at adopting these practices is you're de-risking the hiring process, leaving yourself far less exposed. Personality assessments or psychometrics drop down the list a little bit in terms of predictive validity, so they can be used to enhance the hiring process, but shouldn't underpin the hiring process. I think for me, ultimately, psychometrics, and we are Hogan and Assessio and SHL qualified at CNC Search. What, for me, they are most helpful as a tool in is if you have two candidates that feel like they're both front runners, they can be great tool to use to make that final hiring decision. Once you've done a work sampling assessment and you've had a kick-ass 3-stage structured interview process, which I'm going to explain how to formulate in just a second. References, as we know, who you're going to give as reference? You're going to give somebody that's going to give you a great reference. So references, generally speaking, have a place. But again, if you take a look at what the research is showing us, they only give you an extra 10% of predictive validity. They definitely have their place, but ultimately your focus should be around developing this lovely, systematized, strategic, skillful, and structured interview process. So this is what gold looks like. Now, like lots of things, it's not complicated, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Because if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And then my biggest challenge, of course, is in making sure that your line managers, your board is delivering the consistency around the interviews that you need to create this structure. So basing job questions on job analysis. So the job at hand that this person is going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. The same questions delivered to each candidate at first stage, second stage, and third stage. For me, that looks like 5 or 6 core questions that we know because we've assessed the job that we are going to ask at first, second, and third stage. We want to bake in the value add at every stage. Now, how many of you have been to an interview and been through an interview process when you've been asked the same questions at first stage, at second stage, and potentially even at third stage? It doesn't lead to a great hiring experience, and it certainly isn't going to help you gain the best possible person for that role. So it's asking yourself, what is the value add at this stage of the interview process, first, second, and third? It's critical that you know what that looks like, because that means that internally, it gives a brilliantly deliberate and intentional message about how you hire, and externally, exactly the same too. So is it a skills-focused interview? Is it a softer skills-focused interview? Who's involved in that process? Why are they involved in that process? What are they specifically looking to assess? And then making sure that the candidate has that structure and understands what it's going to look like, and that they ask questions at the end of the process. I'm a really big fan of having questions that invite the Carl response. What was the challenge you faced? What was the action you took? What was the result of that action? And what was the learning from that action? I'll explain that to candidates when I'm asking those initial 5 or 6 structured interview questions. This is the sort of answer I'm looking for. You can even share that in advance before a candidate comes into interview, or if you're working with somebody like me. So what's the challenge? What's the action as a result of the challenge? What was the result of the action you took? and what was the learning from that process. And there's a really good reason why that will enhance what you're looking for. Because we are all looking now to data-driven hiring decisions. We know that having trackable, analytical data that we can understand underpins great decision-making. Feedback analysis is an awesome tool. If you take a look at your hiring process right now, and if in amongst that hiring, there's lots of disparity between the feedback you're getting from different individuals, it's a big red flag that something needs to change. You'll notice that when you start to systematize your process, what happens is a consistency of feedback comes as a result. Having a rating scale is incredibly powerful, really limits bias, is impeccably legally defensible, and allows you to track data that you can then look at in terms of your highest performers a year later. What did that person score at interview? They were an 18. Yes, so 18 in our organization correlates with a high performer. You'll start to be able to track the interview hiring score with their performance a year later, and you'll develop a number at which you can generally predict that if they score between an 18 and a 22 at your first and second stage interviews combined, they're likely to be one of your top quartile performers. Picking your board of interviewers is just as critical. Who's involved and why? What's the value add of those individuals being involved? The same people should be involved at first, second, and third stage of the interview and hiring process, and they should be there for a reason. One of the things that completely derails interviewing processes is everyone being involved and people being involved randomly at different stages, coming in for conversations, no structure, and then basically it's like flicking a coin. Who liked who didn't like who, and of course, without any context or structure, that's all it ever comes down to. Of course, not discussing candidates' interview in between two people coming in and out of an interview is absolutely essential. Of course it is. And there's so many more nuances that I can share with you. Here's the scoring system that we use. Couldn't be any more simplistic and any more easy to use. So in my 5 or 6 structured behavioral and performance-based interview questions, here is the score that they get as a result. Super simple to record, incredibly easy to do as you are interviewing, very easy then to track and monitor and understand then when you look back who's worked, who hasn't, and looking back at those key scores. It creates much more consistency across those interviewers. So before we start the interview process, I wonder how many of you are currently going through a hiring process and have had a really good close look at the role and the job description. Do you understand the key performance objectives? What is most critical? And this should be primary. What is it this person will be measured against in their role? How is that baked into your job description? Because you can then use that as a tool to assess the candidate. We ask candidates when we hire at CNC for CNC Search to sign their job descriptions, because that will be one of the commitments they make in terms of their delivery in their role. And we use it as a measuring tool. I encourage you to do the same thing. Then are you looking at the skills, the experiences, the competencies, the must-haves, all of those core questions or core aspects that should be included in the job description. We see a lot of generic job descriptions, a lot of the same job description being applied to multiple roles. And the challenge with that is that whilst it might list the duties, it doesn't enable or empower you to have a measurement tool that you can utilize during that first 30, 60, 90 days whilst that person is onboarding themselves, whilst you onboard them too. And of course, as Brené Brown says, clear is kind. So when you're designing this job description, ask yourself these core questions. Design the board of interviewers, know who's involved at what stage and what the value add should be at each of those 2 to 3 stages of interviews. Ideally, define the 5 or 6 core questions that need to be asked of all candidates at first stage and all candidates at second stage. Again, thinking all the time of the value add. So we need also to look at the 30% stretch. So how does this role develop over the course of a year? How is that articulated in the job description? It's an incredibly powerful tool to use because we know that ultimately the way that the human brain works when coming in for an interview is they're looking for an opportunity for some form of growth and development. And it is actually the most powerful tool when looking to hire somebody. We know that 92% of all of our candidates prioritize that as number one in terms of the decision making. Number two then is values and culture. So everyone should be looking for these aspects according to research. So coachability, the ability to absorb and process and implement feedback from bosses, colleagues, customers, and others. Emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and manage our own emotions and accurately assess those of others. We know that places like Pepsi Cola now place that as number one. Accountability, so people that take a radical accountability for themselves, their learning, their contribution, problem solvers essentially, not problem givers. And a motivation aspect, so a desire to achieve potential and excel in roles. I'm going to share with you in a little bit some of the questions that you can ask to assess that. And then temperament, attitude and personality suited to the particular role and work environment. So have you bespoke your process? Let's pretend that it's me that's coming in to interview with you. What's my experience? Before the interview takes place, do I know what's likely to happen and why throughout that process? Do I understand what's expected of me in that hiring process? Do I understand who's involved at the different stages and why? Internally, in your stakeholders, do they have that same journey articulated? This is what great looks like, and this is what is expected of anyone involved in a hiring decision at first, second, and third stage. This is why we do it this way. This is how our values are translated throughout the hiring process. Is that something that you could hand on heart right now say is clearly defined? And if you need help with that, of course, I can do that. So during the interview, now, if you want to know one of the wildest pieces of research, it said that you can go from a 30% chance of hiring accurately with an unstructured interview to a 90% chance of hiring accurately for the person that you want and how you want them to be delivering in a year's time through adopting a work sampling and structured interview process. Incredible, right? Because ultimately we are human beings and we're hardwired to belong. And you go into so many organizations, don't you? And you will have seen it yourselves where there is 20 of the same people. We know that from research, the Lehman Brothers crash would have been incredibly less likely to happen had they not had groupthink. We don't want groupthink because we know that diversity breeds creativity, connectivity, far more appealing to investors, to new talent, and much better culturally internally too. However, if we continue with unstructured interviews, ultimately, the first 10 seconds could be the decision maker. Not very useful or helpful ultimately. A few tips as we start to think about your own organization and how might you start to structure and systematize your hiring process. We want panel interviews, ideally, so 2 people in an interview situation, because we know that the research tells us we perform so much better peer to peer. We want to have scripted the interview. Now, I don't mean that you're going to eliminate any personality from the interview at all. That lovely warm welcome you give, how you settle the candidate into the hiring process, the close of the interview process, there's room for tons of personality in both the bookends of your interview. But at the core, you want to know what's covered, when it's covered, what core questions are going to be asked, how you close the interview, so that consistency and fairness and your brand storytelling is weaved in throughout. We want to look at our role as a facilitator in an interview. We want to treat the person that you're interviewing as a consultant. One of the biggest tricks that we miss so often as organizations is to garner feedback from the candidates that are going through the hiring process in order that you can enhance it, tweak it, and create that real leader of the pack and gold standard interviewing, so that that lovely brand storytelling that happens when that person leaves the organization and goes out into their day-to-day is this fantastic and compelling story about who you are as an organization, how you hire, how they were treated. So garnering that feedback can be invaluable, absolutely invaluable. The candidate should be considered every bit as much as the organization when curating this candidate and internal hiring journey. And a candidate should have, when they come in order to be able to perform for you best, and particularly when you think about neurodiversity or any other intersectional factor when it comes into interviewing, the candidate should have an opportunity to have adjustment allowance. So when they first arrive, how are they made to feel? How are they made to feel comfortable? Are they afforded somebody to go through exactly what's going to happen in this interview and what will happen at the end of the interview, in order to lower cortisol levels and allow them to perform at their very best? So that clarity, that clear instruction piece is absolutely important. And making sure that you give the candidate an opportunity, if they need to clarify any aspect of the hiring process, that they're given the opportunity to do so. So here is a really simple step-by-step process. And I certainly don't imagine that you haven't thought about this for a second, but is it clear and is it structured within your organization? Does everyone know what step-by-step looks like? Is everyone clear on what their role is within that process? Does everyone know how they should be delivering it, who they should be delivering it with, how they should be able to articulate it? Is that clarity there? And of course, this can be completely tailored to the needs of your organization. You would never want an out-the-box solution because every company is different. But it starts to give you food for thought in terms of how you can start to curate this within your own organization. So what are candidates looking for? What do they care about? What do they need and want the most from you? And I know that there's always a real disappointment, understandably, for when a client puts an offer to one of our candidates and perhaps they're counter-offered or they have multiple offers on the table and their company isn't selected. It's devastating for everyone involved. However, there are some brilliant ways that you can put yourself as that front of pack organization, is if you really consider, when you're putting together that job description, you're curating your interview and hiring process, what is the continued growth rate for this person in this role? Where's the job stretch? Where's the learning opportunity? How does this job fit into people's lives? Now, it doesn't mean that every single role that needs and requires long hours is demanding. How are you offsetting that? How are you compensating for that? How are you supporting that? Who are they working with? How are they working with them? What's their bigger picture involvement? I always advise clients to look at not only how this person's role fits into key objectives of the role, but what are the key objectives of that team and how does this role fit into that? What are the bigger objectives, the bigger picture piece for the organization? And how does this role impact that? Is that being articulated in the hiring process at second stage, for example? It's so compelling. What are the extra bits? What are the extra value adds this person can contribute to the projects or the tech or anything else? How are you baking that into the process? How is that being articulated and who is articulating it? If you weave this into your hiring process, I can absolutely guarantee it will be extremely unlikely that you will have turn downs or counters accepted. We know that if you are able to ask great questions, you can focus them in on someone that's going to be intrinsically motivated to do the work itself. So often when people are looking at what interview questions they're asking, they're neglecting to ask the questions that will let them know, does this person have a passion for doing the key objectives of this role? And how are we assessing assessing that? Rather than somebody being intrinsically motivated to join your organization. Because so often then they will be the individuals that will cause frustration 3 to 6 months down the line, asking for a new role, asking for development beyond having already delivered or proven their subject matter expertise in the role itself. What does that look like for you? And there are core competencies of great interviewers. So when you're selecting your interview panel, where possible, find those with the best possible core competencies to deliver the style of interview that matches your brand storytelling and that's going to deliver the best possible result for you. There are clear core competencies of great interviewers, those that are able to follow due process, those that are able to really relay all of the information that we've just discussed around how this person fits into the small, medium, and bigger picture of the organization, the values, people that are able to really listen with intent to understand rather than to be understood. Following strategic process. And somebody that's also able to make someone feel safe in the interview environment. Seriously skilled interviewers have an incredible capability to hold space for others, to truly be able to hear what's being said, and using those fantastic listening, advanced listening techniques, repeating back what's been said, reflecting back, responding appropriately, with a level of encouragement that encourages the best from that individual, but again, from a very systematized standpoint. There is a great aspect when you start to look at the development opportunity that you give your hiring managers when it comes to interviewing, is asking how right now they would describe the role that they're hiring for. What are the key features? What are the key features of the team and department? Where is that 30% stretch we've just been talking about? How does this role fit into the strategy of the business? How are the values felt in the interview process, but also articulated? I did some training recently with a big brand, and when we were talking about the values of the company, nobody could actually remember all 5, and nobody in the room paid any attention to talking about values, even though we know that values-led decision-making is absolutely front and center for candidates making their choices in terms of voting with their feet in terms of who they join. Such a simple thing to create such great transformation if you just incorporate that into how you're training those that are involved in the hiring process. And knowing just how critical it is for everybody that's involved in that hiring process to be able to explain the impact of this role, the growth opportunity in this role, and the core challenges that they will face and how they'll be supported in getting through those. My favorite question, and I'm sharing it with you. And I think that I am, alongside incredible theorists, I think this is one of the most powerful interview questions. I absolutely love to understand how what somebody has done in a previous role is most related to the most important key performance objective in the role I'm hiring for. And I really want to get to grips and probe lots and deeply understand that this person has had exposure or transferable exposure to something similar and can demonstrate that they're going to be able to meet one of those objectives with grace and ease and really strongly be able to add value to the process within my organization. So this is, I think, an anchor question. It's a question that should be involved in every single hiring process. But obviously, it takes a little bit of thought right back to the very beginning when you're defining your key performance objectives, so that this question can be one of your anchor questions at first or second stage. I also love to seek out achievers. It doesn't matter at what level I'm looking for somebody, and it doesn't matter at where they've reached their career, from the boardroom to the post room. We don't have post rooms anymore, but you know what I mean. So this is somebody that looks to add impact in whatever way is accessible to them. This is somebody that will enhance culture, not take away from it. This is somebody that's going to seek to add added value, not just do the job in hand. And how do we do that? Well, it doesn't matter what level you're at. There's certain aspects of how somebody articulates how they like to create impact that will always underpin your ability to assess whether or not they can deliver that impact that everyone desires in the job itself. And I've articulated some of them here. So, are they recognized as a subject matter expert? How are they recognized? Who comes to them to ask questions? What have they been asked to contribute to? How are they being promoted? How are they being, have they received awards or special recognition? Or again, have they been rehired perhaps, or given stretch assignments? There are some really strong indicators of an achiever and somebody that's going to bring great value to your organization. So look out for these and create an anchor question around them in order that you can make sure that you've got those incredible individuals joining you. So what happens when we ask a question is that we need to probe the answer in order that you can assess it with that anchor rating scale that we discussed earlier in the best way possible. Now, unless you're a trained coach, so often people don't know how to probe questions effectively. So giving your team some really simple probing questions just like this will enable them to dig that little bit deeper and give the right kind of score to the answer because they've checked out its veracity. Super simple, like most things, but most people simply don't understand how to ask probing questions or don't have the questions in their toolbox. So this is definitely a quick win. This is definitely a quick win. I've got a couple of questions already, and I'm going to get to them. Don't you worry, I promise. I'll get to them all at the end. The bottom line is we live in a much more transparent world, and people are particularly keen to express their opinions online in various different formats. I don't know if you checked out your own Glassdoor score or your own Glassdoor overview. And of course, bear in mind that there are, unfortunately, competitors that will sometimes place erroneous comments on Glassdoor because they don't verify them. It'll often be a disgruntled employee. So don't take them all to heart. But it is important because if you are delivering great interview processes, people will make comments on them. Hopefully, really fantastic compliments to your hiring process. So just making sure that you bookend your process. Clarity around expectation at the beginning, remembering that clear is kind. But for me, the big value add for your brand is also at the end. What kind of feedback are you delivering? If your feedback is simply they're not quite the right fit, that's not feedback. Feedback is something that individual can constructively utilize to do better in the future. It will be incredibly powerful for your brand storytelling, for the candidate experience, for that level of professionalism, and will make such a big difference to how you're viewed and how that person feels about your company post-interview. So is that paid attention to? Now, I'm going to make sure that we finish on time today. And so we've got a little bit left to go through over the next sort of 10 minutes. And of course, you can watch this recording back, pause it, or speak to me directly if you really want some support on improving that hiring process. So this is the formula for success, and it's undeniable. And so if you can add this as an assessment tool to how you curate your hiring process. So how are we looking at someone's capability and ability, their soft and hard skills? How are we looking to how are we then looking at their value add to the role, to our culture, to our company, to their executive, to their team? How are we assessing that? How are we then assessing their motivation to do the role itself? That will lead to incredible results, somebody that's consistent and somebody that looks to exceed expectations. Who should be involved then? How do you curate? Well, you look at, do you need somebody technical? Do you need somebody that's the boss? Do you need someone that's the engager, the supporter? So this bit should have come at the end of my presentation. I was wondering whether I disappeared too earlier. I'll share with you that in just a minute. One of the game changers is looking for value culture add. What can this person add to our culture that we don't have and we would love to have, rather than values fit or culture fit? We want culture add. But to do that, we need to know what the culture is that we have and what we would love more of. Again, a brilliant part of that initial hiring huddle. So you have four main aspects when you're looking at the role itself and who you're hiring: the having, the doing, the getting, and the becoming. And that in itself will help you enhance that job description design process. Okay, so it's win-win. Performance-based hiring is a win-win hiring strategy for all of the candidates involved, plus you and your organization, creating an incredibly powerful, systematized, data-led structure. So all of these aspects are involved in win-win hiring. And all of these are baked into the process that I'm talking to you about. And all of them will enable you to redefine your business within 18 months to 2 years. So what recommendations am I leaving you with today? Is number one, is the goal of the interview is to answer 2 key questions. And these are those questions. And you will only truly assess those through behavioral and performance-based interviews. Have a systematized structure, have a journey, the candidate journey and the internal journey. Understand deeply that your job description is your best possible performance tool once they're on the job. Know what that candidate journey looks like. Know what your internal journey looks like. And be very clear and be able to articulate that. Having this standardized, legally defensible, without a doubt, strongest advantage competitively for all the candidates for the same position. And use a rating scale. So that is number 4, is to use a rating scale in order that you can develop the most trackable, data-led decision-making that within a year will completely transform your hiring process. Now, I've got a couple of questions here I'm going to answer just before we finish today. And if you've got any more, please feel free to put them in the chat. Obviously, won't use your name. So do you have a recommended rating scale structure for panels at different stages? No, the rating scale is the same at every stage. It's the questions that change and the focus for the interview themselves, or the focus for the interviews themselves at first, second, and third stage. The rating scale can say exactly the same. Are we going to receive a recording of this webinar? It's very interesting. Okay, great. Yes, of course you're going to receive a recording of this webinar, and I'm really glad that you found it useful. What are your thoughts on sharing interview questions with the candidate before the interview? Well, I know this is something that a lot of charitable organisations now do, particularly with the view that it supports hiring a more neurodiverse workforce. I personally don't share interview questions beforehand because I don't want pre-rehearsed responses, but I can also understand the theory behind why people do. Are there any other questions? Any other key questions or anything else that I can answer that would be useful right now? I really, really hope that for all of you, it sparked a thought on how you could help your organization transform their hiring process and all of the benefits that will come for you as a result of that. I'm glad it's been a great session. I know it's a huge amount to motor through in 45 minutes. Thank you so much for being here. If there is anything else that I can answer, then please just reach out to me directly. And I'd love to be able to support you in any way that I can, and utilize my 26 years of experience is something I love to do. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of the day. And I'll really look forward to connecting with you and adding any value and being of any service that I can support you with. All right. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Take care. Glad you all enjoyed it. Glad there's been lots of thinking points. Thanks, guys. Take care. Take care. Thanks for being here. Much appreciated.